Tapping in.
Are we live?
Oh, we've gone to a point where there's so much news that keeps happening, so much information keeps coming at us, and we're 82 episodes in, which means we've almost covered close to 80 different forms of news topics and whatnot. And you get to a place where it's you really have to ask yourself, like, there's so much news coming out, and the shootings that happened in Uval, Texas, that was a couple of weeks ago. But yet it feels so distant and it feels so gone. Ukraine is still happening right now, but it feels so distant, it feels so gone. And we found this to be very peculiar. So, in curating a conversation around it, wanted to really explore what is our relationship with news, and like how long do we actually care about news, and how should we approach a world where we're just being bombarded by so much where you can't possibly be able to act on all of it. There's way too much happening.
So much. And so much of it like sad, so much of it scary, right? I'm hopeful that we can use this space as kind of like a check-in even amongst ourselves, and if there are solutions or any advice that we can give out to people, that's fire. But if not, like you said, we 82 episodes in. We've commented multiple times on this show on how researching for the show is is an interesting process in many ways, right? But also digging into the facts about, like you said, things like the shootings in Uvalde, the shooting in Buffalo, the war in Ukraine, the invasion by Russia, even going back to the Israel and Palestine conflict, right? And I say going back, but another thing that's still ongoing. Um, we've been trying to cover a lot of different topics, and I think we always approach this stuff with the intention of saying we are trying to have this conversation in a real way, trying to understand it not as experts, though we do have our own areas of expertise, but trying to understand it as people, trying to figure out how to be human when we see such loss, how not to be numb, and it's difficult. So I guess with all of that said, my first question to you is, how are you feeling when you think about the world, and has doing so much research for this show affected your mental health or your perspective?
I would definitely say, man, that it does put into context just how much information is out there. And on one end, you realize, like, wow, there's no possible way I can care about everything because there's just so much to care about. And that's a bit liberating. But then on the same side, because you understand, because you're exposing yourself to more information of what actually is happening, it does get real sad just to think, like, really, is there a point where we can help everyone, or is that always just going to be the case where we will never be able to help everyone?
It's hard, right? I was driving home from work the other day and I was thinking about our place in the broader movement, right? Like within our respective countries, within all of the places we try and have impact, and even like globally, our place in the movement for freedom and equity, and safety. And I think I long ago acknowledged that a lot of these are battles that I will be handing down to future generations, handing down to my children. Um, but part of me let this dark thought creep in that this period we going through now, these years we living in, are we just keeping the stitching together. We're between great revolutions, and this is a time of suffering and confusion. And those of us that are doing the work of impact are just maintaining the structures that take care of people for a time when we have more agency, funding, and ability to make a broad impact. And that is not how I want to approach my everyday, but that's a real thought that I had.
Yeah. So in in the process of really trying to be active with the emotions of what to do with all this information, what to do with all this information. What I keep getting reminded by a lot of people that we look up to in this space of helping and of servitude is that it's the most important thing is to try and reach one person. Honestly, like you know, that is more than enough. Trying to reach one person at a time and at least try and make a difference in one person's life, and that is you're changing. You might not be changing the world, but you're going to be changing their world, and that's close to is good enough. You know, that's almost like changing their whole world for them. So it's it's that approach that I think is so comforting in being able to see because what we have, you know, we've covered the Uval shootings. There's been over 30 mass shootings in the US. And I put mass shootings in quotations like this because even that terminology and that phrasing is media conditioning. And we've covered the shootings and we've said that media reporting, the way media reports on these things is one of the key indicators that it will happen again. So, you know, it's being conscious of those types of things that there's been so much that has happened in between this short period of time, but because we've gone over the shock of that information, we've now moved on to the next thing, and we move on to the next thing, and then the next thing.
That is what we do. It's what we've been doing for years. And I really appreciate what you were saying about reaching out to the people that are in your immediate circle, trying to um, improve your outlook on the world by creating spaces of camaraderie and collaboration and creativity with your people. I think it does start there, right? And I think it's beautiful to look at everything that's going on in the world and take it as an opportunity to double down on being kind to each other, right? It's more important than ever to treat the people around you with love because we all going through this. So I think that's an incredible thing to take from it. Um, but I don't know. I'm only speaking for myself, but there's something in me that wants to do more, right? Like, yeah, I'm a love on my people, and I don't say that dismissively. I want to do that with intention, and that means extending my patience. That means extending my time and listening, really actively listening, and I don't want to take that for granted. But I also, when I read about things like Uvalde, when I read about things like um, Ukraine, when I read about the KZN floods, something in me is called to do more. And how do we pick our battles in terms of the different things that might be not so local that are devastating that we want to care about, and what is enough to contribute?
I don't. That's a difficult one. I don't know. I don't know because we're exposed to so much international information. Like for instance, the protests that were happening in Sri Lanka. Um, you know that was happening. Zimbabwe had a shutdown, the government shutdown. That was happening. Information wasn't getting out of there quick enough. At the same time, inflation and gas prices are through the roof. More people have been added into poverty over the period of COVID, which is ironically at the same time that more billionaires were created in a single period. You know, so there's so much international information happening. In Addis, there's a war that's happening, pushing people into refugee camps all over the place. Ukraine again, more bombings have happened in Ukraine since the slapping of Will Smith than at the beginning of the war. You know what I mean? So it's just like
What a crazy time marker. what what a what a crazy like milestone.
yeah.
More bombings have happened since the slapping of Chris Rock by Will Smith. Yo, I
Yeah,
appreciate
that's
you,
a
man.
timestamp.
Where else?
That's a timestamp, bro. You know, where were you when Chris Rock slapped Will Smith? That's the
Yo,
new where were you when 9/11 happened? Where were
the,
you when Chris Rock? Where,
people remember too. Word.
where were you when 9/11 happened? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was in my classroom. I was in school, and they told us some garbage about there were bees outside that were harmful, and we had to stay inside. So we didn't have recess and we didn't have no nothing. They just kept us inside. And that was what they told us. And I remember sitting there even as a kid going, bees? you, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's really there's killer bees outside. So that's where I was at. Where were you at?
I was at my grandmother's house. I was at my grandmother's house, and the it happened, and I was playing outside, and she called me in, and she sat me down. She said, "Hey, look at the screen. The world is never going to be the same after this. You need to see this." My grandmother actually pulled me in to show me that. So that's where I was.
Look at two different approaches to dealing with children. Like I wish I would have had an elder to take me aside and say, "This is what's happening," and it's gonna be a lot to process. But I got you. Rather than me being like, "All right, so there's no more bees," because at the end of the school day, they tell you, "All right, cool. Now y'all all go outside and go home." Wait a minute, where are the bees at? They all dead. Now this really don't make no sense. Now I'm scared of killer bees, and I go home just to find out that really there was a terrorist attack. So now I'm scared of bees and terrorists. Don't lie to kids.
Yo, listen, G. It's the same thing with this. Where were you when Michael Jackson died? Those are the you see. There's different moments that history is just going to be a landmark for, where everyone is going to remember what happened. COVID is going to be the same thing. How do you spend your first COVID lockdown? You know, people going to remember that. Turns out, so is where were you when Michael Jackson died?
Yeah, word. Where were you when Michael Jackson died?
In Disneyland, dude.
What? The most magical place on earth when we lost MJ? Dang.
It's where I was, dude.
That's
It
great
was.
and sad
I
and
I
beautiful.
know, dude. They played Michael Jackson on low. It was Michael Jackson at half mast.
That's crazy.
And
Wow.
you?
I damn near fell out, bro. I was just riding around with my girl at the time in high school, and we heard it over the radio. So I'm dating myself a little bit, but yeah, we heard it over the radio, and I was like, "What? They tripping? Like they can't be true." And then we pulled up to her crib. We walked in the door, and her whole family was in the living room around the TV. And as soon as we walked in, they were like, "Nah, it's real." And I saw the news and the headline, and I think there was like even a shot of his house because he died in the crib from the medications and stuff. And when I saw all that, I like to fell out. I was like, "Whoa, Mike is really gone." Because I grew up in a Michael Jackson household, man. My mom loved Michael Jackson. That's like, man, I even the bad albums, not bad, the bad, like the bad, the
not
bad albums.
not the bad album.
The bad album. So that was, yeah, that's definitely one of those that I remember. So we out here, man. We really existing out this mug. I don't know how well it's going, but
But this that being said, Mr. Miles Xavier, uh regardless of whatever is happening, you can definitely count on us to continue to provide you with that carefully curated information, you know. So just in order to make sure that we keep current things alive, and people informed of what's happening in the world, what are some issues that you're currently impassioned by, or things that you are cognizant to happening?
wow, yeah. I think we've mentioned a lot of them here today, and I think my intention is to continue to look for opportunities to organize in whatever way we can. You know, like the KZN floods, they the floods came and went, they did their damage, but we still recovering, right? So, as a part of a space that took me in and loved on me, that's one that still weighs heavily on me. Um, these school shooting, as somebody who's is invested and works and has dedicated my life to violence prevention and even youth violence prevention, the attacks of unarmed people by young white men deeply troubles me. And not like and this even just the pattern of shootings in general, especially using assault weapons in the United States. Um, I'm still struggling with that one. I'm still wrestling with where exactly my stance is and how far I think we need to go in terms of limiting access to these deadly weapons and forming my most articulate and also most empathetic and also most practical argument of where we need to go with that. So I'm thinking about that, and then of course, um, I belong to Chicago, and even though we're a little bit better than last year, and we're continuing to organize around it, the violence in this city is real, and my loved ones are out here walking around. You know what I mean? I just spent yesterday at the Hyde Park Summerfest. Shout out to anybody that was out there. Shout out to Lupe Fiasco, Chicago's own, for shutting that thing down, man. Like only a homegrown person can do in a city. He
He's
made
good.
my month with that performance and the way that he took control of the park. And so I love, like, but that don't get reported on the news like that, right? Us coming together in peaceful and in celebration. And so I'm down to highlight that, but I also yeah, we're working to make the positivity the overwhelming narrative and the overwhelming experience of Chicago. And so that's deep. That's on my heart, and appreciate you even asking me to giving me the space to share that. So, what about you, man? What are some of the things that's sticking with you, and what are some of the fights that we can lock arms with you in?
Your sentiments are my sentiments with Chicago. We know the violence that's happening there, but also, being aware of how many kids have been left behind in South Africa for COVID related reasons, which is why, pushing these laptops out to these kids is so important, and being able to give them a bit of resources to catch up, I would say, is the most important thing. Really trying to allow being aware of what's happening, be my relationship with it, but also fully working towards committing myself towards trying to fix at least one thing. Really committing myself that way. That way, you don't feel as bad about all this information, but neither are you ignorant. It's like you once put out on the show a quote by Denzel Washington: "If you don't watch the news, you're misinformed. If you watch the news, no, if you don't watch the news, you're uninformed. If you watch the news, you're misinformed." So, being able to be aware of what's happening, but also trying to get some laptops to some kids. So, if you want to lock arms, be sure to go onto the Mandula Foundation page, like we keep on saying, and give us some laptops, man. We're handing them out to kids.
Word. And if there are issues that are close to your heart that we haven't mentioned, talked about on this podcast, or that we have, but that we need to go back to because of developments, hit us up, man. Comment, let us know what's going on. This is an open conversation, and we really want to educate ourselves and, give the people us, our thoughts and whatever we can put together in a carefully curated fashion.